What is in your crapper tank, and are you willing to empty it? Yes, on today's episode of Reinventing Thyself podcast, we are going to dive into Empty the Crapper Tank, episode 28. However, before we get started, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever experienced overwhelm or feel that you want to do something new in your life, but you feel blocked? You're not exactly sure. Perhaps you're lacking fulfillment or purpose. Things just don't feel exactly right in your life. I get it. I understand you. We are going to dive into all of that and so much more in the life coaching classroom. But here's where it's super, super sweet. You can actually take a test drive of the life coaching classroom to see if it is a good fit for you. Curious? Want to know more? You're going to want to head over to www.lifecoachingclassroom.com because that's where all the information is. But stick around because we are going to dive into emptying the crapper tank. Hang on. We all have situations, experiences, and moments in our life when we know deep at our core we have to do something different. We have to pivot. And regardless of how big or small that pivot is, it requires us to change something in our life. And that change can feel really uncomfortable. However, it is that change that is creating something entirely new. And it is that newness that creates a very different way of life in one area or multiple areas of our life. What's this all about? It is all about reinventing thyself. My name is Michelle Shutter, and I'd like to welcome you to Reinventing Thyself. I am so glad that you joined me today because it is here that we'll move beyond our old self, our old identity, and that trailer of garbage from the past that we like to pull into the future, but really need to ditch that hitch. It is here that we'll move into that place of reinvention and embracing the newness of it all. Are you ready to step into reinventing thyself? Because guess what? It is never too late, and your time is now. Let's get started. Hey, welcome to this week's episode 28, Empty the Crapper Tank. I am really excited that you carved out some time again to invest in yourself. And I'm honored that you are here listening or watching to Reinventing Thyself podcast, because when I think of reinventing, I really think of like four things, right? Like it is leaning into that pivot, that change. And once we lean into it, we have to allow ourselves to embrace it and all the lessons that come up, because it isn't a linear path that we go through when we reinvent ourselves in some way. It is filled with ups and downs, lefts and rights, twists and turns. However, when we get ourselves in alignment with what we want, we can move boldly through that new beginning and beyond. We can sustain that. But the secret sauce is finding and accessing your full greatness in the gap. And that gap is the space between where you are and where you want to go. It's all about reinventing ourselves. We cannot end up at our end result thinking that we can be the same person as when we entered that gap. So today's episode is really about reinventing yourself at a whole new level. And we are going to use the crapper tank as a way to really look at that and really what we are doing in our life. So if you have not listened to this episode before, welcome. My name is Michelle Shutter. I am a certified life and leadership coach, and I love to dive into all these juicy topics. Today, I wouldn't call it necessarily juicy. However, today is a really important topic to not shy away from, to really lean into and really embrace that whole space of, gosh, what could I do differently to allow myself to have some more space for the goodness, for that greatness to come into my life. And I started the episode by asking, what is in your crapper tank And how willing are you to empty it out? I think that second question is even more powerful than that first question. So let me explain to you, like, what is the crapper tank, right? Well, the crapper tank is kind of this storage unit that we have that a lot of times we strap onto our back, or it's like a trailer that we've hitched to ourselves. And that crapper tank really holds all the old garbage, all the old baggage, all the old junk that we really don't want to think about. We don't want to address. And we stuff it all into this crapper tank. And the problem with it is that we're so afraid to open it, to let it all out, because why? Like, we'll be covered in crap, right? I also like to think about this as like the Ghostbuster, right? And all of a sudden we have all this stuff, and the Ghostbuster is like obviously looking to shoot the ghost, but unfortunately the wand gets turned against us, and all of a sudden like we're covered in the slime. So it's like all that junk. And another way of looking at it is, I like to call it the ocean of you. And I share that in my webinar, which you can find at greatnessinthegap.com. But in that, I talk about the ocean of you. So let's say that we are wanting to do something new in our life. We're wanting to, let's just use health, okay? The health is, again, a super easy topic. I want to, lose 15 pounds. Well, when we make that declaration, the ocean of you, all this junk starts to bubble to the surface. And sometimes it's big pieces of junk. Sometimes it's little pieces that, have been anchored well below the surface that you can't see. Sometimes it's the whole thing like comes to the top, and all of a sudden we're swimming in all this junk. Well, it's crap. It's essentially the crapper tank that's being released. However, the one thing that we need to look at is when all that junk starts to come up, or when we are avoiding dealing with the junk in the sense of the crapper tank, right? We're just continually shoving things in there and shoving that lid tight, or even we can look at it as, I'm going to put that in the closet, and I'm going to shut the door, and I am not going to open that closet door, because if I open that closet door, it's all going to come out at me, right? It doesn't matter which way you look at it. I just give you multiple ways because something will land differently with you than somebody else. But the one thing that happens is that we want to justify the junk. And you might think, gosh, that doesn't even make sense, right? Why on earth would we ever want to justify the junk? Well, we try to make it normal, or we try to justify it because it's all based on our old experiences, our old situations, our old failures. All of that is still connected to us. We've never truly processed all that old stuff. And so we've just put it into all of these containers, or we've tried to lock it at the bottom, anchor it to the bottom of the ocean, or we've tried to push it to the way back of our closet. And the problem with that is it doesn't allow us to process what we would consider a negative emotion. We'd rather hide, run from it, push it to the back, whatever it is, than to fully allow ourselves to process that negative emotion. It makes perfect sense, right? Like, how comfortable is it to process these feelings? It isn't. The problem is when we don't process it, all of a sudden we've got days, weeks, months, years, decades of this that is stacked upon each previous experience. And so when that happens, it's taking up all this space for the goodness, for the greatness to truly come forth. And the one thing that we have to realize is when we are experiencing this space of reinventing ourselves, or, moving through the gap, we have to have the contrast. If we don't know the contrast, we don't necessarily know our potential. We don't necessarily know how to move through it in a way that fully supports us. And when we want to be able to clear it so that makes space for the good feelings. However, many times we have a tendency to argue for what isn't serving us. Unconsciously, we argue for our limitations. Unconsciously, we go back to that experience from a long time ago and we reconnect with that because that's what feels familiar to us. That feels, quote unquote, normal to us. And really, we're just giving our power away to our limitations. What would be different for you if you didn't give that power away? If you made the decision going forward, not necessarily to open that crapper tank so that it fully explodes and that you are like, oh my gosh, I'm so deep in this, I can't get out. But perhaps going forward now that we don't take that emotion and stuff it back into the crapper tank, right? Because all of a sudden something becomes triggering to us, and rather than moving forward and thinking about it and really processing it, we put it in the crapper tank, and then again, we've got decades and decades of it. What about if from this day forward, we just sat with that negative emotion and just allowed it to move through us? And as we find success in that, then we go back to the crapper tank or the closet or the ocean, and we begin to slowly open that and let some of that past come out that is connected to the current situation. I think a lot of people feel overwhelmed in a sense that it's got to be all done at once. And that isn't it. That's not how a journey works. We are able to deal with things as we are presented with things. We may not think on a conscious level that we're ready to deal with it, but it wouldn't present itself if we weren't ready to deal with it. So one of the best ways to create expansiveness is really to ask yourself some questions. So I want to give you some questions here that perhaps can support you in really looking at that crapper tank, deciding if you are going to begin to open it and let some of that out to create new space for you, for your greatness. And if you're not, a way for you to look at gosh, why am I willing to hold on to that? Why am I willing to give myself my power to my limitations? So 2 really good questions to ask yourself is, what do you want and why do you want it? So in this process, what do you want, whatever that is, and why do you want it? You can even dive deeper into that in terms of ask yourself why again. Ask yourself why again. You're going to reveal things to you that are in the crapper tank. I guarantee you. And by bringing that to light, it starts to empty the crapper tank for you. How great is that, right? How great is that? And if you're not willing to look at emptying the crapper tank to make more space for your goodness, you have to ask yourself, what benefit are you receiving by keeping it full and constantly adding to it? Because there's a benefit to everything. A benefit, good or bad, you are benefiting from it in some way. You may not be fully conscious of it, but you are benefiting from it in some way. And then as you begin to make those connections and start to pull out those pieces to make more space, you also have to ask yourself, my gosh, how many months, years, decades have I really been contributing this pattern? As it starts to come out, you're going to see the patterns, right, that are connected. How many months, years, decades have I been repeating this pattern and just contributing to the crapper tank? It's a lot. It's a lot. So if you are in this space where you're looking at your crapper tank going, dang, it's heavy. I don't want to carry this around anymore. Or perhaps you're like in that closet and you can't fit another stitch of anything in it, and you know at the core of your being that, my gosh, I have to let some of this go. Or perhaps you're in that ocean of you and all that junk is around you. And rather than just trying to swim and navigate your way out of it, you take a piece of it and really dive deep into it so that it dissolves within the water. Like, what would be different for you if you emptied the crapper tank? Again, it doesn't have to be all at once, because that can get frightening, right? That can get scary. But what if you took some time and looked at a current situation and then went into the crapper tank or went into the closet or went into the ocean of you and started to find those pieces that were connected and pulled them back out? I guarantee you, you are going to make additional space for yourself to allow that greatness to fully come to light so that you can fully experience it. You know, the only person truly that limits ourself is ourself. And by continually adding to the crapper tank, the closet, staying surrounded by all the junk in that bubbles to the top in the ocean of you, we are putting our own limitations on ourselves. So, what does that mean for you? Well, you can do this alone, right? The journey is yours. But what if it wasn't meant to do alone? What if it was meant to experience it in a new way? Because sometimes when we are so close to that crapper tank, because, hello, we've been carrying it so close to us for so long, it's hard to see what truly can be cleared and how we want to operate from a new space. So what would be different for you if you could receive some support on this? What would be different for you if you could actually take a test drive to see if coaching, life coaching, is a way to really release some of that crap in the crapper tank, right? Well, we are going to, I'm putting together the last ounces of details here, but we are going to offer just that. We are opening the life coaching classroom here before long, and within that, you can take a test drive of the classroom to see if it's a good fit for you at absolutely no risk. Now, you might think, oh my gosh, that sounds too good to be true. Well, I'm here to tell you it's not. The one thing though is you have to be willing to do the work, right? All the details are not put together yet. However, you can get your name on the wait list. And the way to do that is to head on over to www.lifecoachingclassroom.com and get your name on the wait list, because I guarantee you, we are going to dive into a lot of different topics, but all of it is going to support you in one way or another. And all of it is going to show up in your life at a time that you are ready for it. So why not take it for a test drive, right? I will put links to this as well in the notes or in the description wherever you are listening to or viewing this. Know that those links will be there for you to access as well. So as we wrap up today, what are you taking away? I'm going to reflect back to my first questions that I asked in this podcast is, what's in your crapper tank? Get clear on that. And how willing are you to empty it? How willing are you? Are you willing to empty it, or are you willing to hang on to it in a way that just doesn't serve your highest good? It all comes down to choice. And I'm going to take you through some different processes in the life coaching classroom to really clear that up and really create some expansiveness for you in a whole new way. Again, if that is something that you're interested in, head on over to lifecoachingclassroom.com. That's it. That's the show for today. I hope you found some value in this. I would love for you to hit the follow button or subscribe, share it with a friend who you know too probably needs to empty the crapper tank in some way. I would be super grateful if you did pass this show on. But until next time, have an amazing day. Be an amazing you. Well, what are you waiting for? Whether you've pivoted and are unsure, or you're on the verge of pivoting, there is no better time than now for you to begin. Want to know why? Because if it wasn't the right time, the pivot wouldn't have shown up. And to get you started, I've got 3 shortcuts to reinventing thyself. Just head on over to www.reinventingthyself.com and you can download it there. And don't forget to message me with the shortcut that resonates with you the most. One last thing. I know you and I are not the only ones that have leaned into the pivot. Be sure to share this with others so they can be supported too. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you for supporting me and sharing this message. Until next time.